Thank you, Nari. I'd like to start by saying I know what some of you are thinking. How can this guy possibly have graduated 6 years ago? He looks about 12. And it's true, it's taken me a full 6 years to grow this goatee. It's an honour to be here with you all, particularly those graduating, to share a few thoughts on life post-MPP. I imagine you'll have dedicated quite a bit of time to thinking about what next. Before you is an opportunity to define or redefine yourself in the world, outside the halls of this august institution. I would hazard a guess that many of you feel some weight of expectation, and that one reason you came here is indeed because you aspire to make a world better led, served, and governed. Maybe, at this juncture, you find yourself at Robert Frost's two roads diverging in a wood, and you must decide which one to travel by. But the road ahead will not always be smooth. In my experience, you'll deal with rejection, the heat of criticism, feeling like an outsider and being in over your head. And so, in reflecting on the last 6 years, my encouragement to you tonight is to find a reason for hope. Find a reason for hope in your own circumstances and help others around you find a reason for hope in theirs. After graduating, I began working for the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, in places where there may seem to be little reason for hope. I've had to return to grieving parents, the remains of their sons in body bags, literally blown to pieces in conflict in Helmand, Afghanistan. I've seen hundreds of people living in squalor on a beach without food or drinking water, fleeing violence in Myanmar. And I've visited detainees waiting for their trial that will, more than likely, never come. Yet even in such places, there are reasons for hope. I've seen ambulances waved through checkpoints so that even enemy combatants could receive medical care. I've reunited a mother with her daughter 13 years after she was abducted as a child in Uganda. And I've seen people who've lost limbs to landmines regain their independence. These glimmers of hope are what I cling to. Hope is closely linked to optimism. Yet optimists are often said to be naive. You start off idealistic, the refrain goes, and as you get older you become more cynical and call it realism. Well, if that's the case, then my grandmother would beg to differ. At 101, she's seen a thing or two and has taught me a great deal about optimism. She would say that being optimistic is a discipline more than any kind of genetic predisposition. It's an alternative narrative or way of thinking, a way of motivating yourself and others around positive change. And she walks the talk, 101, and she still plants fruit trees in her yard, knowing that she may not live to see the fruit. Amidst flurries of fake news, it's easy, almost in vogue, to criticise. And criticism undeniably has its place. But one should ask whether such criticism helps to make the world better, or whether it's just vacuous rancour, informed by a resignation that the way the world is the way it always will be. Think of the people you admire. People, I'm sure, who seek to unite and build up rather than divide and tear down. Over 150 years ago, Henri Dunant, the founder of the Red Cross, Red Crescent movement, had the decidedly improbable vision of bringing a measure of humanity onto the battlefield. Today, the Geneva Conventions are universally ratified and facilitate humanitarian access to people in the depths of conflict. Through disciplined optimism, you find a reason to believe that things can change for the better and that you can play a part in making them so. Disciplined optimism also helps answer the question of why it is that we're doing something. And when you can answer this question, it makes sacrifice worthwhile. In the choices I've made since leaving BSG, by far the biggest trade-off has been time with family. When my grandfather passed away, I was in a refugee camp in South Sudan. When my mother was diagnosed with cancer, I had just moved to Switzerland. And my wife and I spent 4 of our first 5 years of marriage apart because of my postings abroad. The last 6 years have involved sacrifice by multiple people and regularly interrogating why we had chosen this path. But ask any of those people if they'd have had it another way, and your answer would be negative. At least I hope it would be. My wife Dash is here this evening, and so you can ask her yourselves. She's a lawyer, so is unlikely to give a straight answer. Practicing the discipline of optimism does not mean denying that bad things happen or ignoring sinister motivations and perverse incentives. It does not mean failing to engage in sober analysis, in strategizing and the daily grind. It does not mean throwing caution into the wind and hoping for the best. Practicing the discipline of optimism does mean focusing on the positive and what you can control while being humble in the face of what you cannot. It does mean listening to that inner voice urging you to take a risk. It does mean reality checking your assumptions and spending time in the trenches. And it does mean, when you're intimidated by someone, thinking of them on the toilet with their pants down. All of a sudden, they become patently human. In conclusion, I hope that when you look at your degree on the wall, you remember why you did it in the first place. As I have, I hope you'll continue to draw sustenance from the lessons and people you encountered in this wonderful place of learning. If you are at the juncture of 2 roads diverging in a wood, Grandma would say, don't be afraid to take the road less travelled by. Congratulations, and wherever you go from here, I wish you well, and I wish that you give yourselves and others a reason for hope. Thank you.